Hey there, and welcome. In a world that is just overflowing with information, we're constantly bombarded with data, logs, and metrics. It can feel like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a hurricane. Well, today, we're going to turn that noise into a clear signal. Together, we're going to learn how to go from just seeing data to truly understanding it, transforming simple observation into powerful analysis. So, this is the big question, isn't it? How do we make sense of all the data we have? We've got the spreadsheets, the dashboards, the system logs, just tons and tons of data points. But just collecting data isn't the same thing as understanding it. So, how do we turn all of that raw material into actual, genuine insight? That's exactly what we're going to break down step by step. And this gets right to the heart of the matter. Think about it like this. Observation is just collecting the facts. It's seeing that something happened. But analysis, that's the art of figuring out why it happened and what it actually means. It's the difference between seeing ingredients on your kitchen counter and knowing what recipe they're for. And this perfectly sums up the core challenge. A single data point, a process starts, is totally neutral. If that's your scheduled backup kicking in, it's normal. If it's some unknown program connecting to the internet at 3 now in the morning, well, that's suspicious. Without context, data is just noise. Analysis is all about providing that context. So this brings us to our first practical step, where to focus. If we tried to monitor everything happening on a system, we'd be overwhelmed instantly. The sheer volume of data is just too much. The secret to effective analysis is knowing where to point your flashlight in a huge, dark room. So where do we point that flashlight? We focus on the most important areas. Think of it like defending a castle. You watch the castle's engine room, the critical processes, you guard the crown jewels, the sensitive files, and you absolutely keep an eye on the gates and windows, the external connections. Focusing here gets us the most valuable information with the least amount of noise. Okay, so now that we know where to look, the next question is how we look. We need a way to guide our search, and that's where the hypothesis comes in. Now, this isn't some complex scientific term, it's simply an analyst's superpower. It's what turns passive watching into an active investigation with a clear goal. A hypothesis is just a focused question based on a hunch. It's a statement you can set out to either prove or disprove. For example, I think this new piece of software is what's slowing down my computer. That's a hypothesis. It's simple, it's clear, and most importantly, it's testable. And this process works in a simple, powerful loop. You start with an idea. Then, you focus your observation just to test that idea. You're not looking at everything anymore. You're looking specifically at the CPU metrics related to that one process. And based on that focused data, you can confidently say, yep, that's it, or nope, that's not it. Just like that, you've completed an analytical loop. Now, as you're testing your ideas, you'll be collecting signals from the data. But a key skill for any analyst is realizing that some signals are more important than others. You've got to learn to distinguish a meaningful clue from a random distraction. A weak signal is a one-off event, a single spike in network traffic, one failed login attempt. It's interesting, and you should probably note it down, but on its own, it doesn't mean much. It could be a system glitch, a user's typo, really anything. Acting on a weak signal alone will usually just send you down a rabbit hole. A strong signal, on the other hand, is where a story starts to take shape. It's not one failed login. It's hundreds of failed login attempts from the same address, followed by one successful login and then some weird file access right after. You see, the events are consistent, they're repeating, and they connect to each other. That's a pattern, and that is a signal you cannot afford to ignore. As we get better at finding signals, we also have to be aware of the common traps that can completely derail an investigation. Even seasoned analysts can fall for these, so just knowing what they are is half the battle. Here are the big three. Overreacting to a single event, that's chasing a weak signal and wasting your time. Ignoring context, like panicking about high server load without realizing the nightly backup is running. Assuming without checking, this one's the most dangerous. You see an unusual connection and assume it's malicious, but it could be a legitimate cloud service. Always, always verify. This quote really sums up the ideal mindset. Good analysis requires patience. We observe, we question, we verify. Great analysis isn't about finding an answer in 5 seconds, it's a deliberate process. You observe with patience, you constantly question what you're seeing, and you always verify your conclusions before you act. So we've walked through the whole process. We've focused our observation, used hypotheses to investigate, and interpreted signals while avoiding those common pitfalls. That framework is now yours. You have the essential tools to start thinking like an analyst. And this is why it all matters. The ultimate goal isn't just to understand data for its own sake. The point is to interpret the behavior behind the data so that we can make better, more informed decisions, whether that's fixing a technical problem, optimizing a system, or identifying a security threat. And that brings us to the end of this breakdown. We've laid out the roadmap from data to decision. So I'll leave you with this question. In your own work, in your projects, or even just in your daily life, what's the first critical area where you'd start looking for a clearer signal?